Hello and welcome to Little Things with Amber L.B. Swinson. Today we're continuing our series of conversations that I recorded live at the Christian Leadership Experience in La Crosse, Wisconsin earlier this summer. This was a conference that brought amazing leaders together from all over to teach us how to be more equipped to do our jobs better in the Christian realm. This conference was put on by the Antioch Foundation, which is a philanthropic organization that helps many ministries, including Time of Grace, with financial support. Today, I'm airing a conversation with Dr. Brandon Hayes and Lori Kinsley. Now, I just want to warn you that we're talking about domestic abuse, so this may or may not be the conversation for you. I have to admit that I was fairly rattled by this presentation because it got really intense as happens when you're talking about domestic abuse. But I wanted to have this conversation to open a door first for education, to remind people that this is happening and to look for the signs that this is something that could be going on around you, and also to prepare us to walk alongside of those who have experienced this or maybe are still experiencing this now. This might not be a conversation that is necessarily enjoyable, but it's important. So thank you for listening. Hey, it's Amber, wife, mother, type A child of God. Here at Little Things, we look at everyday issues from a biblical perspective with one simple goal: to know and love God more. Thanks for listening. Dr. Hayes, would you please give us a little bit of your background?
Certainly so. So I am originally from the Fox Cities area and went and studied psychology and got a master's degree and PhD in clinical psychology. I have worked for Christian Family Solutions as a psychologist and also helping oversee some of their research outcomes program. And nice. I presently work in Appleton.
Thank you. Lori.
I have been working for Kingdom Workers for the last 2.5 years with their domestic abuse program, which is RISE.
Can you guys give me a little background? What qualifies as domestic abuse?
So it can really be a variety of different activities. I think classically we would think of it as physical violence, which can be and often is a component of it within a family or domestic situation. But it also can be far greater than that. It can involve emotional control and psychological name-calling and belittling. It can involve financial limitations and restraints. There most certainly can be sexual abuse as a part of it. And in addition, it can be kind of an abuse of just someone's status in terms of whether it is they're a minority or whether they are perhaps here with immigration issues and paperwork as well, too. The core concept with all of the abuse, though, really is it's about power and control.
So I was just in your presentation, and you mentioned that a lot of people don't understand or recognize that they're in these abusive situations. How common is abuse? And is there a difference if you're in the church or outside of the church?
Good question there. So domestic abuse, the statistics are that 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men will have been in a severely physically abusive relationship sometime in their life. So that, of course, that's the severe physical, not talking about emotional and all the other types. It's also very hard to get people to come forward.
Yeah.
So someone once mentioned to me, do you have any idea on how many times somebody drives drunk before they actually get caught? So it's somewhere between 300 and 3,000 times that they will drive drunk before they get caught. And so abuse is somewhere in that realm of from the people who report it to the ones that are in abusive relationships. So
talk to me about how we in the church a lot of times do things that actually negatively impact people who are being abused. What are some of the things that we can say without even realizing that we're keeping a person with their abuser?
There's a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, it just, when they come forward and try to say that they're in an abusive relationship, oftentimes it's minimized. It's kind of like, it's really not that bad. Maybe you should just pray a little bit more about this. Be a better spouse. Submit a little bit more. God hates divorce. That you really need to work on your marriage. And unfortunately, victims of abuse are working on their marriage. They're working very hard. They want it to work out. And so when they come forward and they get that, chances are they're not going to come back and mention it again. They're just going to be like, okay, now I don't have any help here either.
Right. Another problem is that a lot of times we say things like, why don't you just leave? Why is it so hard for abuse victims to walk out of the marriage?
So I think, we did an exercise in the session today that really looked at just how it is so complicated based upon when people are abusive, they do limit access to resources. They limit finances. They limit access to career advancement. The whole idea is really to restrict and to limit opportunities for independence, for self-sufficiency, things like that. And so when you actually start to figure out, like, if you have children, like, where can you actually leave and go to if you have children? If you have a pet, many resource shelters for individuals who are being abused, they don't allow pets. So then are you going to leave your pet at home while you leave? I mean, it's just a very, very complicated situation. It's sometimes an option for people to go to a domestic violence shelter. Unfortunately, many of them have a waiting list, or there is a limited amount of time you can stay at the shelter. So what do you do? Because most of these situations are not even close to being resolved in 3 months.
Right.
Which may be one of the caps that you can stay for a short amount of time, but then what? Where do you go?
So I found this very interesting. Talk about how a lot of people don't recognize that they're being abused, and they come looking for counseling for things not yet ready to admit that there's abuse happening. So they might have a high level of anxiety. Like, I have so much anxiety. I don't know how to deal with this anxiety. Well, what's going on at home? Then you realize, oh my goodness, you're walking on eggshells, because if you don't do X, Y, and Z, this is going to happen. So can you talk about what, if the statistics are 1 in 3 or 1 in 4, depending on male, female, male, people are listening right now who are being abused, and they may not be putting the pieces together. So what are some of the things that they might think that they have to work on that may be pointing to something deeper?
That is such a great question. And I think one of the comments I had made in the session was that I have been a psychologist for almost 20 years. I have worked with many families, many women who have been impacted by this. Never once yet have I had them call in explicitly stating right out of the gate, I need counseling for domestic violence. As you said, Amber, oftentimes it is anxiety, because they are constantly living in fear of saying or doing the wrong thing that could set off their abuser. It might be an issue with communication, because, people who are abusive may tend to say very harsh and belittling and demeaning things. And so they want to improve communication. Another common one is anger management. Of, he just has a bit of a temper, or she has a bit of a tendency to get reactive. And so they often will come in, and then we'll start to peel back the layers of the onion and realize, this is not an anger problem. This is really about power and control. And the anger is really flowing from that. That's kind of the symptom. That's not the actual problem. Okay.
Can I ask, I don't know if it's even fair to ask this, but as I was sitting in your presentation, I was wondering, do you ever have abusers voluntarily coming in saying, I need help? I've hit my wife for the 8th time, whatever. Does that ever happen? And can you rehabilitate abusers?
So that's a great question. I have not had that happen. What usually is the case is, I think we had even talked about this last evening too, that it's really, really rare for someone who is being a victim to lie about being a victim.
Right.
the lying tends to be on the behalf of the perpetrator or the abuser. Very, very rarely, because we talked about this in the session, part of what drives that need for power and control is underneath it. It's inadequacy, it's inferiority, it's self-loathing, it's they don't feel good about themselves. So for them to actually admit, I got a problem here, I need to go get some help, is highly unlikely to happen. They may concede a little bit, like, yeah, at times I can be a little bit loud, or at times I can maybe be rough. But I have never had someone voluntarily come in and say, I am abusing my partner, I need to get some help for this. Can they be rehabilitated? I'll certainly give you a chance to answer here too. It is a very, very long process. Because you really need to get in and help people who are being abusive change some of their core understandings of relationships, of emotional regulation, of things like that. So it's common where, for example, we may get referrals from pastors, or they may come in and say, you need to help this couple learn how to have better conflict resolution, or they need to learn how to have better anger control, as if that's the problem. And these are well-intentioned people. They're not,
Correct.
Trying to set people up for failure. But it is not about anger. Anger is the symptom. The problem lies far deeper beneath that.
Did you want to add anything?
Only thing is that a lot of times victims will come in thinking that they are part of the abusers, because it's hard to describe, but they've been told that it's their fault all along. And then there's something called reactive abuse, which is probably way too much to get into in this time. But a lot of times the victim will come in thinking that they could be the abuser.
Really?
Yes.
That's very interesting to me. So what I'm hearing, if it's very rare for the abuser to identify that they are the problem, and if it is a very long process to rehabilitate, leaving tends to be the best case scenario, and yet that's the hardest thing to do. So it's almost okay. We're not gonna end this on doom and destruction, despair. So what I would love to do is please give us some resources. And how do we get out of this cycle? I love the educational piece, just talking about it. Anytime you take something out of the dark and bring it into the light, you're doing something for someone, even if it's a 16-year-old girl who hears this and recognizes the signs in a relationship and says, I'm going to get out before I get married. So it's worth it to talk about. So can you give us some hopeful, what can we do educationally? What can we do as friends to watch out for things? Give us some hope.
Well, I think the best hope is that if you've been in an abusive relationship and you take the time to process it and learn about what healthy relationships are, the research that I've heard is that it's something like 80% of those who go on to get into another relationship, it will be healthy versus repeating that cycle of abuse again. And then we also have a program that we're starting at Kingdom Workers. The Love is Healthy Relationship. So we're hoping to prevent getting some of these people from getting into these types of relationships.
Dr. Hayes, if there's a woman or a man listening today who knows that they're in an abusive relationship and they feel that hopelessness, what's a first step? They don't have a lot of resources.
Yeah, I think one of the first steps is for them to even just begin to identify what are my local resources that are available. I think truly one of the most important things is it's hard to understand what's all happening and getting a realistic perspective when you're still in the midst of that relationship. Mm-hmm. So to be able to separate is really important. It is also really important to try to identify who, if anyone, is going to be on my support team. I think you did a very nice job of highlighting that. I mean, it takes a village of people. There's not just, I've got one supportive relative. It is trying to have maybe the pastor and their faith communities be supportive. Maybe it is friends, coworkers. I've been involved with that even at work at times. We've had some people in very, very unhealthy relationships, and how meaningful it was for them to actually have their coworkers rally around. So it's try to kind of get out, but also then begin to identify what is that support team going to look like.
We talked at the beginning of this interview how sometimes spiritually we can go in the wrong direction, causing guilt to these people who, are we making progress spiritually with pastors and churches with the programs you offer with Christian Family Solutions? Are we turning some light bulbs on so that more and more pastors and more people in the church recognize this and come alongside people as opposed to unintentionally pushing them away?
Yeah, I think there is progress that's being made. I think the fact that, we were invited here to talk on this topic speaks volumes about that. There also is, through Christian Family Solutions, one of our providers, also with Pastor Italiano, have put together a 4-hour introduction to domestic abuse and domestic violence, which is available to help educate not just pastors, but certainly that would be a great opportunity, and also just individuals who have a curiosity and a desire to want to learn. It's available on the Christian Family Solutions website. And so when we're actually seeing people in ministry who want to actually educate because they get it, they understand, I think that's a really encouraging sign.
That's huge. We have a program also at Rise there. It's just a short presentation on what's the difference between marital conflict and domestic abuse for pastors, so they can kind of tell that difference in a pastoral counseling setting. And we have some wonderful, wonderful pastors out there who get it and are doing amazing work in their congregations and communities and helping survivors of abuse. We have a long way to go, but we're getting there.
Again, this is really important. We do want to walk alongside you. We want to point you to resources that can help you. So if you are struggling at all, please look at the episode notes. We have resources available to at least get you started on a path of healing. Thank you both for your work in this area. Both my producer and I were in your session, and I left feeling like I wanted to throw up. So for the fact that you go in day after day and you help people, just thank you on behalf of all of us. And just a huge shout out to the Christian community that have come alongside abuse victims to do what you can to find these resources, educate yourself, and walk with people who are hurting. This has been Little Things, because in God's kingdom, the little things are the big things.